Welcome to The Lost Signals Discusses Film and TV. Using the revolutionary Manzur-Amosi Thurlow scale,
or MOTS,
we scrupulously review these art forms with an emphasis on narrative structure. Join us for another entertaining episode.
Hello, and welcome once again to The Lost Signals Reviews Film and TV. My name is Chris Morgan. I'm here with Stephen Amosi.
Nice to see you again, Chris, there.
Good seeing you, Steve. Scott Thurlow.
We're all in this together.
And Professor Jonathan Ian Manzur.
I'm just a renegade duct cleaner in a bureaucratic world.
And tonight, we are reviewing Terry Gilliam's 1986 masterpiece, in my opinion, Brazil.
I'm pretty sure it's 85, by the way.
I think it came out in 85.
I'm going to retcon it, yeah.
All right.
Just to be clear, but yeah.
It's mid-80s, post-19... It's part of the Reagan-Thatcher era, let us just say.
Yes.
And does anybody have a funny log line?
Oh, I have a log line.
Will people
Orwell meets
funny or not?
Orwell meets Kafka in 1985's 1985.
Yeah. That's where making it clear was 85, but yes.
You know,
Nice.
They were calling this for a while 1984 and a half. I mean, that was one of the working titles for it. Was
That's pretty good
1984
too,
and a
yeah.
half.
And they were calling it Kafka-esque for a long time.
Yeah.
Because
Really?
it certainly is. Yeah.
Oh, indeed.
Okay, and Scott, would you like to start us off with plot?
Certainly. So Jonathan Pryce plays Sam Lowry, sort of mid-level in a vague futuristic London or British dystopia where, as referenced, it's Kafkaesque. It's all bureaucracy has taken over, and ostensibly there are terrorists doing terroristic things, but not really. Like we'll get into that, but it's again a overarching like Big Brother-esque government in which he's a middle manager more or less, and sort of has dreams of escaping, like literal dreams of escaping this sort of nightmarish hemmed-in world that he lives in, and eventually does meet his dream woman in reality and goes against his own superiors and government and so forth and becomes a renegade. And of course they catch him. It's pretty much the exact end of the actual novel 1984, in which he's being tortured but escapes in his own dreams. And yeah, it's sort of like a jaunt through that. It's all absurd, like you said, Chris. It's a Terry Gilliam film, so it certainly has a lot of the hallmarks of his style and his sort of commentaries on things, but that's pretty much it. He starts off as a disgruntled middle manager and gets more and more removed from the governmental overarching reality as it goes along, and gets involved in like sort of a little side plot with his, again, quote unquote dream girl, and then ends up the government wins, but he also wins by escaping into his own dream reality once again.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
that's pretty much it. In terms of score, so I like Brazil quite a bit. I've seen it a number of times, and we're doing this sort of part of our dystopian, like dark satires, I guess, like section of comedies for this year. So
Just like American Tale.
yeah, exactly. Of a reflection of actual times.
Mhm.
But yeah, I still think it holds up quite a bit. Now, we were discussing a little bit precast that I think the dream sections themselves, not that they're a little too much, but they don't. I think they could have been like sort of tempered down a bit, I guess I want to say. I think those are the weakest parts, even though I still think I get why they're relevant and why they're there as part of his character and to flesh out like his view of the world and how he wants to escape. But I think the action moves along quite nicely. It is a longer film, sure, but I think overall it's paced pretty decently. So I'm looking at a fairly strong 2, although I could possibly be convinced of a 3, but that's how I'm viewing it. So what do you guys look at it as?
Yeah, I completely agree with the dream sequences part of what you just said. Like, I remember looking upon those more fondly than I did on this viewing, I guess.
Yeah.
And in this one, they are kind of overlong and tend
Yes.
to slow down the plot and what's really happening. Like, you could get the same idea of what purposes are serving and have them be much shorter and less
exactly,
frequent.
dude. Yep.
But overall, I do really love the plot of Brazil, and I love the way that it moves along. I literally just had something to say, and now I've completely forgotten it. But yeah, like in terms of those dream sequences, they are. I used to think they were better, I guess. Like upon my third or fourth viewing of it.
How about this, Steve-O? They're not as necessary, or at least as many of them are. Like you can, like you said, you can get the gist of it without.
I'll go even farther, and I think that at times they're indulgent. And I also think at times they grind the plot to a halt, where I'm interested to see the progression of events as it incorporates like kind of a little bit of neo-noir into it.
A little bit,
and so I'm interested in the mystery that he's building here and the world he's building. And you're introducing two fantastical set pieces here, both the world of Brazil, but also his fantasy world. And you really shouldn't divide the time between trying to build two separate realities when you have one that's very, very interesting and also very detailed and fantastical in its own right. So I actually I think that maybe one of those scenes, maybe two of them, would have sufficed for the entirety of the film.
I generally sort of I'm not bored, so good.
I wouldn't necessarily go that far, but I think that you're right. They could have been, most of them could have been cut down, and a couple of them could have been removed.
Yes.
And you would still get much the same idea without sacrificing a lot of screen time away from the things that, away from the real action, right? Like you realize that none of this is really happening the entire time you're watching it. So it's like, all right, I want to get back to what's really going on. But yeah, I think I'm probably going to give this a 2 in terms of plot. I love the plot, but as you guys mentioned, and as we all talked about now, I think I have to take a point away for that.
Yeah, pretty much same thing. So what do you think, Chris?
I'm kind of coming on. I'm gonna give it a 3 because I actually remember the dream sequences being longer. To be honest with you, I walked into it like,
they are long.
No, but the thing is, I actually thought they were longer and more indulgent.
Longer than that.
And it turns out that originally Terry Gilliam wanted to have all the dream sequence, the entirety of it at the beginning.
I think that would have been a better choice.
I might have preferred that. Yeah.
I don't know, because to me, narratively, it kind of showed how the reality of the situation was interfering with this ideal world he had. And I got a lot more out of it this time with regard to how he was, why he took the promotion, the reason he took the promotion, obviously to follow Jill.
Yeah.
And and like how really in a lot of ways by the book he was until the ending to a certain degree. Like he was still trying to do that whole thing, like when he was getting trying to get the widow's signature on the check, he's like, I didn't have to come here. Like he was just being like, there's parts of the time where
he's still just going along with it.
Yeah, I was becoming, there's times where I was like, I can't believe he was not as sympathetic as much throughout this thing. So to me, in a lot of ways, I was expecting the dream sequences to be a lot longer, but I found that the dream sequences, while they did disrupt the narrative, actually told a better story as where he was throughout where he was intellectually, emotionally, internally throughout the piece. So while I see where y'all are coming from, and while again I remember the dream sequences being actually longer and more disruptive, I actually found they went a little farther than I remembered towards his character. So like I said, I understand where you guys are coming from. I just felt like towards his character, the dreams made a lot more sense. Yeah, I think they could have been clipped here and there, but overall, it's not enough for me to deduct an entire point. This would be a 2.5. If this were not a binary scale, it would be a 2.5. But
yeah, I get you. But I think just for that, like just for me, like in general, it seems that they are just the weakest part of the narrative in general. Even if they do serve a purpose to a degree, but I'll stand by, like they could have been condensed or cut down, or the original thing you mentioned, if they just front loaded it, like boom, there you go, now you know, and
See,
Would've been fun.
he's also juggling a number of subplots going on as well throughout the film, whether it's his mother's social circle, although that informs his decision making. You're having this world being built with other characters who are doing other things, and I think that inherently the dream sequences can conflict with the themes that are developed through the side plots.
Yeah, I feel you. So yeah, I'm sticking by 2, a stronger 2, but I'm taking a point off mostly specifically for that.
And Ian, you too?
2, yeah.
You as well? Okay. And
With no caveats.
What did you say?
With no caveats.
Yeah.
Steve-O, would you like to discuss the themes, please?
Sure. There's a lot going on in this movie theme-wise. You know, you have the very obvious like parallels to things like 1984, and things like that. There's this other theme of like his, you know, this has to do with the dream sequences. Actually, funny, funny that we talked so deeply about him, but like, you know, he's really discovering himself as like, you know, this is like a precursor to almost like Office Space or something, you know, like he very much is discovering how much he hates the bureaucracy of like the work-a-day corporate, you know, I already said bureaucracy, but like that type of life. Yeah, exactly. And it's really an indictment of that, like, you know, kind of you lose your soul to, in this case, like working for government, but like I think it's very similar to a lot of films and works that came later that talk about losing your soul to a corporation, working there, or like, you know, just really the daily grind of kind of no change and nothing new happening day in, day out, and that you know, that Kafkaesque, as you guys mentioned earlier,
the Kafkaesque bureaucracy of his existence.
Yeah, that grind really like kind of is destruction to the creative soul, right? So like that's what a lot of artists were looking at in like this, I guess, the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, you know, through today to some degree, but like it's really interesting that Terry Gilliam's take on that, right? Like there's a whole string of films and novels that came out about this very same thing, which is what I thought was kind of the most important and interesting theme. You know, there's like themes of like weird unrequited love in there too, and
it's almost a subplot, but sure, it's there.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll let you guys. I've said enough. I think I'll let you guys go if you have anything else.
I mean, no. I mean, briefly, like I mostly agree. Yes, that's like the biggest and I think most on display theme. I think it works quite well. Like, yeah, of course, yeah, like you can't ignore the fact that it's very, very heavily influenced, and this is going to bleed over in a style even of like the 1994 like, you know, mindset of that. So like in one character like trying to break out of the grind, you know, the cog, you realize he's a cog in a machine that will never do anything else, and that the government itself is like mostly incompetent in a sense, or they're just in power to be in power and not really achieving anything. And he finds himself trying to, you know, get the, you know, his spiritual side of humanity back. So yeah, I think that's pretty much, it bleeds in the character probably as well, which we'll speak about. But yeah, I think that's like the major one, and I think it still holds up and it, you know, holds water. So I'm gonna give it a 1.
I'm gonna get over my soapbox for a moment.
All right.
I have, over the years, I've become less and less sympathetic to the argument that he's making in this. I almost feel it's a cop-out. I can't be my creative self. I want the call of adventure. I can't get it because either society is stopping me from doing it, or like another film we watched today, the event hasn't come where I can really show the hero that I am. But I actually think what's very interesting is Robert De Niro's character in this. A man who's like, I'm going to go out and do my own thing and jog on the rest of society. And
stick it to the government.
And I wasn't really sympathetic at all to Jonathan Pryce's character because I felt that it was it's kind of excuse after excuse to stay comfortable while telling oneself that if only the right situation happened, I'd be a hero.
Yeah,
and
he did feel super entitled throughout this entire movie.
Yeah,
like, oh, this I deserve this now. To the point where he's like driving Jill's car, truck for her, like when they're in trouble.
Yeah,
like
you're right. I was gonna mention that later
he
on.
lights
but, like,
cops on fire.
Yeah, he makes terrible decisions at that point. But I don't know. I still think thematically, like, even given that angle through that lens, I still think it works for me. But I do see what you're saying. Like, it maybe isn't as effective or as sympathetically.
I'm not saying that it's bad. I'm just saying that I'm not sympathetic to the argument anymore. If you're upset with your life, do something about it. Be Robert De Niro. Do not be Jonathan Pryce.
Sure.
It's really funny you say that because when I first saw this in the movie theater when I was a teenager, it was a completely different perspective on everything. But like Jonathan Pryce's character, I had a little more sympathy back then. But as I said before, he seemed like he was still beholden to the industry, like he was still a bureaucrat pretty much
to anything.
Yeah. So, I mean, the funny thing was even now I find myself not so much rooting for him, but kind of rooting for Jill, Robert De Niro, because obviously, like as you said before, when he tries to, help Jill, he makes things worse. He actually gets people killed, gets her fired, then accuses her of being a terrorist, and then she's just like, "You're an idiot, and why don't you get off your ass and help me with these people who actually do need help?" So I don't. I wish I had talked to you about this, Ian, because I would now like to research whether or not
I'm here now.
What do you want?
I don't want to stop right now and be like, "Hey, wait a minute," because after what you said and after this last viewing, I'm not 100% sure we're supposed to really actually be rooting for Sam the whole time.
That's exactly what I was just going to say.
Yeah,
fair point.
No, that's a fair point.
I don't think that you are. I think you're supposed to have some contempt for him. Like, I think he's supposed to kind of ride the line there.
If not, then you wouldn't have Jill. Basically up until the end. Like the ending is kind of weird because Jill kind of acquiesces to whatever. They're in a safe place. I guess she's kind of given up to, okay, hey, I mean, not give up, but I mean, like, say like, okay, I am in a safe place in this penthouse. So what the hell? But she's been an indictment of him the entire time. He's complicit. He's part of this world and he's complicit to it. He wants to stay where he is, in his little cube, which, most of us do. Because once you get, to middle management and beyond, you actually have responsibility and you have to deal, you actually have to talk with more people. But his he's completely a selfish character through the whole film. Completely.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And like his mom is his mom's vain. She's selfish in a different way.
Yeah.
She's a socialite. Yeah.
Yeah. So like to be honest with you, the only people that to me have any bit of altruism about him are Jill and Tuttle.
Yeah. I mean, you're right. I think that something that's talks about as well, which I want to just briefly mention before we go on, is kind of government ineptitude. And like, I love how like everybody in the government other than him and Jack are basically completely useless at their jobs.
I mean, again, it's like they're just doing their motions as they've always have been, and they don't actually take any like responsibility.
Well, exactly. When they get a curveball, nobody has any idea how to deal with it except for Sam. I mean, and Jack is competent as well, but in a different way.
Yeah, he's also kind of a sycophant in a sense. But I'm sorry, I meant to mention a plot. But like literally, the whole thing is caused by an actual bug in the machine, like a literal bug, fucks something up. So like, of course, it's a joke style, but I'm just saying like it's also an indictment on the system itself. So I think that does tie into themes.
Absolutely.
Are you saying that government's not fit to handle trivial matters, let alone big
Pretty
events
much.
like a virus hitting?
Yes. That is pretty much
I
what
can't
am
believe
saying.
you would say that.
I can't believe you would say that.
And it's
It has only become more true.
Yeah, I was going to say this movie, when I first saw it, I understood the satire as somebody who is not a fan of Reagan nor of Thatcher and who was pretty anti-establishment then and, whose big thing was, like when I was ashamed to admit it, but when my buddies and I were toying with doing like some of a punk band, I wrote this thing called Corporation Uber Alles. Because there was always like part of the Republicans, the conservatives. And then as you get older, you realize, no, the fucking establishment is corporations uber alles. I mean, the Democrats, so it's like now that I'm looking at it now I'm even
We're in danger of losing the plot here, Chris.
No. What do you
go on. I said we're in danger of losing the plot.
No, we're not. Because I'm touching upon the themes of this, and the older I get, this thing became a satire, then it became a horror movie, and then it ceased to make me really fucking angry yesterday. Well, because it's just like, oh my God, nothing's changed, but my perception's changed. Which I'm saying ties into the themes is like to look at this film and look at these themes over the past 35 years, whatever. This movie, unfortunately, never has not become less relevant to me.
Wait. So eternal bureaucratic recurrence? Jesus Christ.
Standard move.
To quote Dr. McCoy, the bureaucratic mentality is the only constant in the universe.
The only winning move is not to play.
Yeah. So
giving themes a 1 for sure.
Yeah,
for
me
all
too.
That.
But I really just kind of wanted to say that, to me, it's like the themes never change. It's just my perception of them over the years. I found
the movie's the same.
Huh?
I said the movie's the same. You change.
Yeah, exactly.
You've just wandered a few more bureaucracies, and you realize how it's not a comedy, it's not a tragedy, it's just reality.
Yeah, that's all right. So it really definitely is a horror movie.
Yeah.
Okay, so everybody's giving 1, which leaves.
I love Big Brother.
I've won the war over myself long ago. And I love Big Brother. Yes, go on.
Okay, so it's on to me with antagonist.
Indeed.
It kind of ties hand in hand, does it not?
I was going to say, well, there's also, all right, there's the bureaucratic, there is the overall bureaucracy. There's a, I mean, there's the giant bureaucracy, but then I don't know. There's something that occurred to me when we were trashing Sam Larry before. Like it's like I get. Also, if we're going to look at a character standpoint, the antagonist is his self-worth, whether it's earned or not, how it's elevated. It's kind of like he's battling himself within this bureaucracy. So yeah, I guess I'd say the larger world bureaucracy, and we're just looking at one man's journey on it. So
that's pretty much it. It's a nebulous, the bureaucratic like machinations, right? And then maybe as exemplified by that, and maybe a few characters like the fucking basic deputy minister, whatever his fucking title is, and a few other characters. But like they're just basically, I'm gonna steal something you said this a while ago, Steve-O. They're basically just tendrils of the greater bureaucracy, anyways. So
like a sprawling ductwork, almost.
Yeah, exactly. Like they just insidiously get in everywhere, and now they're invading your home.
I'm just gonna go out and say it. Bob Hoskins is legitimately the person who causes the most trouble for our protagonist.
He exemplifies it like the most. Sure.
No doubt.
Just the petty level of bureaucracy is there. I think that each character really does represent a certain facet of it. Whether you have the boss who's incompetent, the Peter principle up to the point where he's incompetent, so he's requiring his underling to help him out. You have the sycophant elitists. You have the petty workers. You have specifically the guy who was next door to him to share a desk.
Yeah,
like he's antagonized by that world. So I agree with you, Chris, on your assessment of that.
Yeah. I'm going to give it a 1. I think that all is pretty spot on and makes sense and is pretty clearly there. So I think it works.
Yeah, I completely agree. That is the antagonist. The just overall blanket of bureaucracy
Yes.
that
Well
encompasses this world, and it's,
And our belief that we're anything.
God.
Yeah. Sorry.
Sure.
Go on.
Oh yeah, I think that it's really well realized, like really well realized in this movie, which is why it stands the test of time and why it's, why people still go back to it and look at Brazil and say this is a hell of a movie. Is because it shows better than a lot of other films that try to do the same thing. Exactly why the bureaucracy of the world is so ridiculous, and that's
and the absurdity of it. Yeah.
it makes it look easy, and that's not an easy thing to do. So I'm gonna give it a 1 for sure.
And I'm also going to say he's a little bit of ahead of his time, and maybe this is pushing back the themes a little bit, but there's a lot of really nice environmental messages about it. About like Joni Mitchell says, trim, put up a parking lot.
You're right. It's sort of like dropped in there, like not highlighted, Chris, but like background stuff, environmental storytelling, if you will, about the environment.
They pay paradise and put up even in his dreams, there's a landscape and the buildings pop up. And the guy, you thought it was a phone booth, but it was like a fresh air with a mask. I mean, like I said.
So terrorism is good, Chris?
Were there actually any terrorists?
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to bring up later as well, right? It's 1984 thing. The whole time, like, all the terrorists are doing this, and you clearly see explosions, but it's very heavily implied to me, even more so this time, that the government, of course, is perpetuating it in order for them to be like, we have to fight the terrorists.
I just think it's the ductwork falling apart.
Everyone confident in himself.
Yeah, the incompetent government is having explosions everywhere, and they're calling it terrorism.
Yeah, too many ducts, and then you get explosions. But either way, I think it works. It's an absurd, of course, satire on it, but I still think that is part of it, and I'm going to still give it a 1.
As am I.
Definitely a 1.
No.
Okay, and Scott, that moves us to you with the protagonist, man.
No, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't. Well, it's not me. I think it should be E.
Yeah.
Was it? Oh, shit. Sorry, Ian. It's to you. I can't read my own fucking notes. I apologize.
So Jonathan Pryce plays Sam, who we've talked about pretty much at length right now. And I didn't even realize that I might have been suckered into thinking that this mistaking the intention of the filmmaker with this. But after I did my little diatribe, you guys said that might have been the point. And I'm like, perhaps. Because he's an unlikable guy. I mean, he's privilege personified in many ways. And if that's the intent, they did a fantastic job. If it's not the intent, they did a terrible job. But I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt to Terry Gilliam and Jonathan Pryce.
Yep.
Because, I mean, he was the Pope. And he was one of 2 popes.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
It's just called 2 popes.
Yeah. I'm going to build on that. Like, I think it, like, again, upon this specific most recent viewing, like, I think it is clearly intentionally there. Like, you're not necessarily supposed to like this guy because he's kind of a twat, like, to use a British term, right? He's not the most likable or most, like, respectful guy.
Someone just watched Shaun of the Dead.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I feel like I'm able to utilize that right now. But no, like, in all seriousness, like, while, of course, Jonathan Pryce is an amazing actor and does a good job, the way his character is written doesn't necessarily facilitate you being sympathetic to him, and I think on purpose, right? So while he's, like, ostensibly, in quotes here, the hero, right? He's not necessarily that. He's definitely the protagonist. It's his story for sure, but he makes sometimes stupid decisions. He acts irrationally and erratically, which puts himself and others, ostensibly his dream girl, in danger as well. Whereas if he didn't do those actions, it would have been much better, right? But I think that's kind of the point, of course, in a sense. Because he's been so ingrained in this bureaucracy, even though he ostensibly wants to break out and has literal dreams about it, it still doesn't translate to his actions being, like, logical and conducive to that. So all that to say, I'm going to give him a 1. You don't have to like him as a character, and I think that is part of the point of the script and the portrayal, but he is the way he embraces his character, so you follow along with it, even if you're like, what the fuck are you doing, Sam, in certain scenes. So
I like what, Ian, you said about privilege, because it really is a matter of he can choose to excel in a in the corporate ladder or not to. He chooses he wants to stay here, but it's not like he's hurting for anything. He goes and he goes to the
Mommy.
better word, the slums, to be like, to do the check, and he's like, I didn't have to come here and everything. But once there's something he wants, then he has to take the world down with him. Like I said,
he literally goes back on his word. He's like, oh no, actually I want the promotion now because it's going to be served. He's self-serving it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I agree with you. I agree with you that I'm going to give him a 1. But the more we talk about it, the more I think about it, and it's really hard for me to believe that Terry Gilliam actually maybe wanted us to like this character.
No, I think Terry Gilliam knew what he was doing with the character. So
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah. I don't think he wanted you to like this character. It might be the case that he wanted you to. I don't want to say didn't want you to like him, but it might be the case that he wanted you to find this a flawed character that you end up being on the side of. But I'm not even sure that's the case after having watched this again.
There are a couple of scenes in there that kind of hint that he's the villain, especially you mentioned earlier the driving scene where he's basically, I'm driving this truck now.
Yeah, I mean, not even the villain, but just like a dumb pawn in, or like a dumb cog in this machinery that thinks that he knows what he wants. And honestly, this reminds me a lot. This is what I was trying to remember earlier that I completely forgot about. This reminds me a lot of Player Piano, which is a book that we read recently, but a more like ridiculous version of Player
more
Piano,
absurd
right?
Kafkaesque version of it,
which is funny to say about a Vonnegut book. It's like, this is a more ridiculous version of that. But I mean, like it is just like this idea that the person who has grown and evolved inside of this system, even if they want to break free, you don't understand what that really means, and you don't know how to be a person outside of that, and how to be a good person outside of that, especially in the case of Sam. So, like, I like the way that character was developed, and despite the fact that I hated him sometimes for his actions, I think that it was a well done job. So I'm going to give it a 1.
Yeah, I think all that stuff was intentional. So
yes, as was my intention of picking Player Piano and Brazil in the same month.
There you go.
Sure. Yeah, well done. But yeah, it works overall. So I think it's a 1.
And if I'm not mistaken, that would be Scott. That would move you to secondary.
Now it is indeed me. So, of course, sorry, since it's on me, I'm going to take Bobby D as Harry Tuttle, Archibald Tuttle, or Harry to his friends, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it's almost like it's more than a cameo, but it's like less than an actual supporting character, but he certainly has a standout scene when he shows up and like does all the duck thing. It's a very famous one, and he shows up a couple times too. But I think even like Michael Palin plays a character named Jack, who is sort of like Sam's like mirror in a sense. Like he's ostensibly in the same position, but is much more ambitious and embraces the bureaucratic governmental system. So you can see like the parallel. He's almost a foil, I guess is the word I want, to Sam. I think that was really well done. And then of course Joe, where like he has dreams of this girl, and then he sees like the same girl in real life, the same woman in real life, and sort of has this fantasy of going away with her and like having life together. And like she's anti-government, anti-establishment as well. I think all the side characters, his mother is really like, they're all absurd characters for the most part, many of them, but they make sense to the world that's already been set up and unfolds as it goes along. So I think collectively, like, sure, De Niro probably gets the biggest one, or like the standout in a sense. But again, one of you mentioned, I don't know if we mentioned yet, precast we did though, Bob Hoskins is in this film for like, again, a scene or two in which...
And his Luigi.
Yeah, and his random partner.
They do a better Mario job here.
Jesus Christ, I cannot believe I didn't think of that.
It's so good. Yeah, it's amazing. But yeah, I'm saying like they all serve the world and the greater themes that we already discussed and so forth. So I'm giving the supporting cast collectively a very strong 1, with, of course, Robert De Niro being the standout given his portrayal, his performance, the character he served as sort of like a catalyst in Sam's life that sort of was like if Sam was waiting for a call to action, a call to heroic action, that was That's what his character served as.
What I loved about Jill was her actual reaction to if someone decided to just randomly choose a call to adventure. I'm going to save you, damsel in distress. No, leave me alone. You're creeping the hell out of me.
Yeah.
But I have to say, also, like the mother's high society friends are very good about the vapidness of the elites.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
Yeah.
I think they all work together to service the world, and pretty good. So
there's an interesting thing that the recurring his mother's like I guess best friend who is getting more and more like bandaged throughout the movie because she's going to the acid guy instead of the knife guy, for her for her elective surgery. And then
yes, Steve, I've always liked that gag. It's really funny. I joke.
Yeah, sure. And then her daughter, as like being a possible love interest for Sam, who neither one of them are ever interested in each other, and they just keep getting put together, and like they have to go sit down next to each other and like make nice or whatever. I like those two characters. That's really Scott. You took every single one of my.
Sorry, I know there's not that many,
characters.
But what is there? I think again, all like builds up to the world. So
absolutely.
I'm gonna backtrack and go and talk a little bit more about Tuttle and Jill, because I think those two characters. I mean, all right, Catherine Hellman. Anything she does, I love. I mean, she's just gold.
Right. Sure.
So that's Sam's mom. But I think the importance of Jill and Harry cannot be understated, in which case that they're true heroes, because a true hero isn't anybody who, and I hate to use the word hero, but the thing is, it's true altruism. You don't really looking for, you're just trying to be a good person. You're trying to help your neighbor. I mean, Jill, she was always very responsive to her downstairs neighbors. I mean, she actually went to fight the bureaucracy in City Hall
and found herself in the Kafka's nightmare, but she was trying to do the right thing. Yeah, fair.
And so is but these people don't really want they just want to help out. And I think the importance of them is to be like, no matter how dour the situation is, there are going to be people out there. So I love the bright colors in this really drab world. How bright these two are, just for that reason, because they really had true humanity in them. There was nothing, everything everybody else did had a certain amount of calculation to it.
They were the least self-serving characters, I guess. It seems you're saying, yeah.
So, I mean, I agree with you. I'm going to give them one, but I just found those two characters to be extremely important and just such a refreshing in this whole film that every time they're on screen, I just was really enjoying.
Well, I just want to build off that for a second, in that oftentimes Sam will kind of imagine them, especially towards the ending, as these great heroes to fit his ideal of what a hero is, and where he views himself. Where you're right, in general, they're just people who chose different paths and are the good people. They don't have to be leaders of a resistance or anything like that. It's like,
that's a really good point. Well done.
Yeah.
Well, good building on both. So I'm giving secondary pretty strong one for all that, and for all your little angles that you expanded upon.
I actually like this movie a lot more than we discussed it than I did coming out of it.
Nice.
Yeah. Nice.
Well, it's a big film to unpack. Which brings us, Steve, would you continue unpacking with the dialogue?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I really like the dialogue of this. There's double speak and triple speak all throughout it. Like, it really, it comes from that lineage of like 1984, as we've mentioned several times already. True. And like the amount so you have Gilliam, who is just comes from his own lineage of like this very clever, very worked dialogue,
very witty,
coming from Monty Python and whatnot. And then you have him trying to do something in bureaucratic doublespeak and like just finding the humor in that. And I thought that this does a very good job when it has those like really good moments of like just headbutting or whatever, whatever's going on in the world in terms of work or for him or like him trying to find anything out and being kind of stonewalled, things like that. I really loved a lot of the way that the dialogue worked. So I'm going to give it a 1.
So like, I was somewhat debating it. Like if I was going to give a 0 to anything else, it might have been dialogue, even though, as you said, Steve-O, it's very much steeped in that tradition of like sort of British witticism and the double speak kind of like double thought thing. But like, yeah, the jokes and the serious stuff like still works in terms of that, like of what is spoken by between characters and so forth. I just think maybe like to me it's a little weaker versus other questions for this movie. But I probably will end up giving it, I guess, a soft 1 overall. But a lot of it is either going to bleed over to style or like is intertwined with style anyways, to me, like in terms of this and the next question. So it's just all I'm saying is in the back of my mind, I was going to like maybe make a case for a 0, like a softer 0 to this question. But I do agree that having you listen, like you talk it out, like, yeah, it generally works more often than not. And when it doesn't work, it's few and far between. So
it's a different style of comedy than I think we generally see, in that it's not snappy witticisms. It's like nor quotable lines in it.
Yeah, I guess
it's more like a slow, methodical, paced out kind of doing humor on a not even like a dry sarcasm level, but like in a sense almost face value in an absurd situation.
I like that. That's a good way to describe it. Yeah.
Like for instance, I think a great exemplar of it is even in the first scene when they have the newscaster talking about how the amateur terrorists, like, they're just,
the campaign's going for 13 years.
13 years. He's like,
making his luck.
Yeah.
I think he says, yeah.
But like, it's, so it's not quotable like Monty Python is, or like the Edgar Wright films are. But it is, I think, done in a style that works for the type of comedy that Terry Gilliam's trying to create.
I think that's a good assessment. What do you guys think?
I think it should be noted is that one of the people who wrote the script was Tom Stoppard. He's an English writer. I've seen a couple of his plays. I have not seen the entirety of it, but he did, I believe he did Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead.
Okay. Yes, okay, sure.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah, so when I was in college and I saw a couple of his plays, I was like, "Holy shit!" Now I could tell like the Stoppardisms throughout the film. But yeah, I agree with you. I'm going to give it a 1. But the thing is, there's one quote that has always stuck out to me, and I'm paraphrasing it slightly because it's not exactly this. But when one of the guards is tying Sam up at the end, he's like, "Confess, son, quickly. You'll ruin your credit rating."
Yeah,
yeah.
I did remember that. Yeah, sure.
To me, it says so much. It's one of those. It is definitely one of those lines that, like, yes, take it literally. It's funny, but if you expand it, it's
much darker. Of course, it takes to a darker tone for sure.
Much darker and a lot more real.
Yeah. But no, I guess Oh, you guys are right. Like, I'm still giving it a 1 anyways, but a stronger one than I initially was coming into in theory. So yeah, good. Well done.
And that brings me to style, and I am going to. There's a lot to love about the style, in my opinion. But I'm going to focus on the music because there's a couple things I noticed this time around. First of all, is a score by Michael Kamen, who I believe died about 99 or early 2000s. One thing I noticed about, though, he'd always do plays on the song Brazil.
Of course, yeah.
But he would also interject, and I meant to look this up prior to the podcast, and maybe I'll mention it in a blog or a vlog, or maybe not, was that there are hints of Tchaikovsky's Piano Concerto No. 1. And I found that I really wish I had twigged that sooner because I would like to have taken note when it was throughout the thing, but it because I know that was also one or two go-to skits with Monty Python too, so I knew it. I really thought that was a nice little, I guess, Easter egg.
Or just inclusion.
To Cayman's score, which may not have been extensive with regard to like a John Williams score, where basically he scores every second of film. I found it quite effective, and I'm going to move it on to you guys because there's a lot to talk about with style.
Yeah, I mean, agreed. Like in the sense that I think style is probably like one of the strongest, if not the strongest, point of this film, and it's still like influential because of that. Like largely, I would say, right? So like you get the surreality. As much as we talked about how the dream sequence may have detracted from plot, the way they look and are set up is quite interesting. Like it's very surreal, and even like everything else, like especially the duct. Like everyone, I didn't actually notice it until this viewing. His mother's house even has like her opulent mansion also still has ducts thing coming in. Like now maybe not as much, but like yeah, it adds to the weird like because of claustrophobic feel of the world, the government, the ineffectual incompetence of the government of their infrastructure and all that. Right when he drives his little like almost like one man little like fucking pod thing as the government car, and then that gets wrecked, like all that stuff. And yeah, like it's Terry Gilliam, right? So it's gonna have this edge of surreality to it, like regardless, but filtered through the dystopian, again, like 1984-esque vision, right? I think it really, really works and still holds up. So I'm giving it a lot of credit. And yeah, when it's darker, it works, and when it's more like absurd, over the top, it also works. So style probably, maybe even if with themes, maybe a little bit higher, but definitely a very strong one.
Yeah, with this, movie, you get shots like this one. If anybody's watching this on YouTube, I got a still from the movie behind me, and it's just insane.
It's
as a lot of this movie is, and that's kind of what I love. Like not just the cinematography is great, but like it's the blocking of scenes and like the setup and the set decking and
exactly
and everything is like really, really, there's so much attention paid to making this seem just, for the most part, like just slightly weird, like slightly off reality, right? Like not so crazy that it's like impossible to imagine, but also nothing feels quite real, and it's,
well said.
Does such a good job of doing that, I think. So I was going to mention the soundtrack, but Chris, you talked about it a little bit, and yeah, it was really well done.
Yep. Certainly ties in.
I think it's great. The colors are amazing as well throughout.
Tiny screens, man. Tiny screens.
Tiny little screens.
Yeah.
I would say just one final thing. Many of the jokes are visual in nature, so like that, of course, like is going to add to it. So that helps.
Fighting over a desk is one of the best visual gags I've seen in the movie in a long time.
Yeah.
And that's one of the most remembered scenes as well. Or his boss at the retrieval thing, who's walking down the hall with all the lackeys following him. Yeah.
Retract. Yeah.
Like this has a number of classic scenes in it.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and like when he comes into his apartment, all the pipes are everywhere, and like, your call center services are here to help you. Like they're not helping at all. But yeah, the entire like visual aesthetic is very strong.
And the couple things I did want to take note of is yes, all the tiny screens. Like even in the poor neighborhoods, there's a little TV in every room. When the boss isn't away, they didn't have like YouTube per se, but they were watching a film.
It might as well have been that, yeah.
They had a whole thing where the woman didn't have a bank account, so they couldn't do direct deposit. And I really wasn't sure how prevalent direct deposit was back in the 80s.
Well,
and one of the funniest and at the same time most horrifying gags in the film is when Sam's going to see Mrs. Buttle, and the kids are playing outside and they're interrogating one another.
Yeah, they're playing basically terrorist and government. Yeah,
yeah.
It's just and they're talking about like the credit and all that stuff, and they're holding guns. I'm like, it's hilarious and horrifying at the same time.
Yeah, the kid has a paper bag over his face as if it were like a government like mask that they've shown earlier. Yeah, I've read about that, Chris. Very nice.
It's just little nuances like that.
that was probably the strongest for me. So
It's Terry Gilliam.
Yeah.
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 exactly.
And Ian, would you recommend Brazil?
No. Because I think it's a very niche film. I know it didn't get much play in the U.S. when it first came out. It's a clever film. It's overlong a little bit, and I don't think it'll play for the majority of people, even though it's well worth a watch if you're into a very specific set of movies. Also, I kind of like Baron Munchausen better.
Well, you always like Baron Munchausen. But I feel like I get where you're coming from. I'm going to recommend it probably. Now, yes, it might not be for the masses, but like that might be like what I was going to say. Like, is that it's almost a litmus test. If you don't like Brazil, then maybe we don't have as much to talk about or hang out with, like in general, because I don't know. I still think it's influential. I still think it holds up as relevant and as resonant. Now, yeah, it might not be for everyone. Maybe not everyone will get as much out of it or understand it. But I still think it deserves to be seen, and maybe it's my myopic sort of vision in a sense. But I am going to recommend it because I have a nostalgia-ish for it. Like I've seen it before, and I still think it works. It's a good pick for this segment in general, Chris. So yeah, I'm going to recommend it, but I see the caveats there. I see your asterisks essentially, but I'm still officially marking it with a 1. So
Yeah.
I am definitely going to recommend this movie. I think that it's something that everybody should see. I don't care who you are, and I think it plays a lot better to the masses than you think it does, Ian. I have not heard anybody, and I've talked to a wide range of people about this film.
I talked to 4 people about Brazil in my life.
How many of them said they didn't like it?
Right 3 of them are here right now.
I don't know. It's a movie that comes up a lot when it's like, I want to watch a movie that's like a classic or something. Like, what should I watch? And that's a movie that I'll say like, I really love Brazil. Like you should check it out. And I will say this. I looked it up after you said that because I was like, I wonder what the general population thinks. And on Rotten Tomatoes, 102,000 user ratings, and they have a 90% audience score. So seems like most people like it.
A
just
7.9 on IMDb.
maybe I saw that. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
That's still fairly high though.
And even if it had a low score, I would still recommend it to people. You know what? If they don't see the brilliance in this, then that's on them.
They're already a cog anyways. They're lost.
I think it's something that should be watched by as many people as possible. So I'm going to recommend.
First of all, Ian, I pretty much guessed why you were going to give it a 0. I'm like sitting here going, I know Ian's going to like it, but so that's not I'm like, all right, cool. But I have been recommending this movie for 35 years. I do not recommend it to everybody, but I do recommend it to enough people on a quasi-regular basis, as much as you recommend any 35-year-old movie, to somebody. It's not an easy watch. I was watching yesterday, and it's not an easy film to watch. But it is, as Steve, as you said, it is a film that I think it's an important watch. Not to sound pretentious, I wish it would be more resounding. I really wish the message
had more like a broad appeal in a sense. But
it's something came into focus. Being my as anti-establishment as I more recently becoming, is that there is a quote by Terry Gilliam was surprised how well it played, with the right. And it's just like, well, the message is here, the anti-corporate, the anti-bureaucratic, that's not a left-right position. And to me, when I saw that he was surprised that it plays on both sides of the spectrum, to me actually makes it more of a film that's worthwhile.
Sure.
Yeah, so like I know I'm like, okay, good. So I can recommend this to people I didn't think I could recommend this to before. So I mean,
Sure.
Yeah. So okay. Well,
Where does that leave us?
that leaves us with an aggregate score of a 9. Ian gave it an 8. Scott and Stevie gave it a 9. I gave it a 10. We disagreed on plot. I gave it a 3. You guys gave it on 2. And we agreed with everything else except Ian didn't recommend it. And you're not a curmudgeon, buddy. I just know my friends, brother.
I understand.
I'm glad my reputation precedes me.
Only because I know you, dude. It's only because I know you. But just one other thing. And this is going to, unless we have a theme for next April, this Time Bandits will be my pick for the next Gilliam film that I pick.
Okay, that's good.
I'm picking Baron Munchausen for the next one.
What?
Yeah.
I'm picking Baron Munchausen for the next one.
We hadn't seen discussing doing Baron Munchausen for a while, so look out for that. But yeah,
because I think and I'd love to see Baron Munchausen again because I haven't seen it in a long time. But it's also one of these things where Time Bandits was on a couple years ago, and a buddy of mine was over, and Beth and my buddy were just like, "I've never seen this movie." I'm like, "You're kidding me." So yeah,
I've never seen it either.
Really? All right.
Well, all right. Well, look out for that.
We'll see if I recommend those.
All right, so Baron Munchausen and Time Bandits. All right, guys, does anybody have anything else to say?
That's it.
Well,
all right, I have been Chris Morgan here with Stephen Hermosi.
See you in the next bureaucracy, folks.
Professor Jonathan Ian Manzer.
I'm going to clean your ducts.
I have no response. Scott Thurlow.
he fucking stalled the thing I was going to say. I was going to say I'm going to go clean my ducts right now, but it's fine.
These ducks are clean.
These ducts are clean. Fucking
Game over.
With that. And with that, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Good night.
Editing and engineering by Christopher Morgan. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates. Or mods?